Welcome back. Today we're going to be putting together a 13-foot Boston whaler. We're going to cut this video into 5 different parts and we're going to show you step by step what we do here so it's easy to understand. So part 1, we're going to show you how to put on your rub rail. In part 2, we're going to show you how to mount your outboard. In part 3, we're going to show you how to put together your console. And then in part 4, we're going to mount the console into the interior as well as connecting it to the outboard. And then in part 5, the final piece, we're going to show you how to put your fuel system together, how to mount it into the outboard, and then how we're going to run our electrical throughout this boat. So let's go. So first, we're going to lay out a few things you'll need to put on your rub rail. We're going to be using a Sailrite hot knife. We're going to be using an impact drill. We're also going to use number 10 1.5 inch screws, as well as number 10 finishing washers. You're also going to need number 8 3/4 inch screws, and we'll also be using number 8 finishing washers today as well. And last but not least, the most important thing is you're going to need a rub rail. This is a 50-foot dock and post bumper small. So this rub rail is actually meant for docks and piling as a bumper. TaylorMade does make other products specifically for rub rails for boats. However, we found in the past that the ones they've made are a little too small for us, and we'll show you a clip. It's probably rolling right now. I found an old rub rail in the back of the shop. It's one that we used to put on these boats, and I'll show you the right reason why we don't use this, and we're going to be using a dock and fender one instead. So, as you can see here, this would sit on the top, and then this would sit right here. It doesn't really do a good job of covering. It really just kind of covers the edge here and just sits there. The reason is because it's a 3/4. So it's not a whole circle and it's not completely flat. So it really just sits to protect this right here and doesn't really prevent any collision on the side. So that's the nice thing about the one we'll be installing today, or that we have installed, because you know this, is that it's flat and it's like a half circle. So it sits a lot better against the side of the whaler. So these ones, not so great. We've had them in the past. We still get damage on these edges here and on the side. So that's why we'll be using dock and fender bumper instead from TaylorMade. They used to have a 3-inch, I believe, or 2-inch, and I believe they got rid of those. So instead, we'll be using this TaylorMade rub rail right here. For the dimensions, just in case anyone's wondering, it is 3 by 5/8 inch width by 1 1/4 diameter. So if you haven't noticed already, half of this rub rail has already been put on. Scott and Josh started this a little bit earlier before the camera started rolling, and now we're just going to finish, and we're going to be showing you how we're going to be putting it on. So in the box with your rub rail, you'll also get instructions on the 2 different methods to install your rub rail. Now the first one is going to be the fold over installation method, and the second one is going to be the top of the boat installation method. So you can pick whichever one you like and go from there. We're going to continue putting on this rub rail. We're going to continue by putting the top edge on first, and then we're going to come back through and make our second go around, and we're going to put the lower end underneath the boat. So in this part, you're going to need your screws, your washer, you're going to need your impact, and what we're going to do is we're going to have Scott pull, and I'm going to put the screw in. So we discovered that about 6 inches keeps the screws evenly spaced where they keep good tension and pull on the rub rail evenly, versus putting in every 3 inches, which looks very excessive, and I would definitely say is overkill. So we'll be doing ours about 6 inches apart. So screw and washer, I'm going to have Scott pull. So this is probably one of the more difficult parts of the whaler, is these corners and these rounded edges. As you can see here, there's a lot of excess. So there are 2 options. Is you can kind of just fold. I've seen people, they just fold it and they call it a day, or they just leave it as is. The other option is, what I'm probably going to do is I'll put another screw in between so that it's about 3 inches, and that way this part of the rub rail is secured and nobody like catches their foot on it or trips, or you don't get a bunch of sand or dirt underneath the rail as well. So hindsight 2020, I'd probably recommend putting this screw in first, 3 inches apart, and then putting the next screw in about another 3 inches apart. That way you don't end up with this extra right here. What Scott's doing here is he's taking the screw and the washer, he's drilling it through the rub rail, and then he's actually pushing away from the previous screw that was put in, and that allows to get good tension on the top side of the rub rail, and that way you don't get these pockets of extra material that people can get their shoes caught on, or you can get dirt caught underneath. So we always find these corners a little tricky because there's always a little bit of extra here. That's where the number 10 screws come in. We'll be using the number 10 1.5 inch with a number 10 finish washer, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do right here. Ready? So we're going to pinch the material. We're going to take this screw and we're going to actually screw it through, okay? And then you're going to lift and pivot kind of on that point, and you're going to screw straight down into the fabric once again. So you're gonna have about 3 layers of rub rail, which is why we use a lot bigger and a lot longer screw here. And that'll basically kind of create like this very clean finished look, in my opinion, for this stern and port quarter. So as you can see here, these top screws that we put in earlier, they do have some pull on them, but that's why we place the lower screws in between each one. That way it just pulls evenly throughout the rub rail versus just having a lot of pull here and a lot of pull here and a lot of pull here. Does that make sense? We also have Grace, who is our special guest for today.
Hi!
Are you recording?
We're still recording.
You're still recording?
We're going to continue to put screws in this lower edge here into the underside of the whaler. We'll go all the way back, and then once we get back to the corner over there, then we'll show you what we're going to be using the hot knife for and how we're going to finish this whole thing off. Ready? Let's go. So now we're going to use our hot knife to cut this. I realize a hot knife is expensive and not everyone has one. So another thing you can do is you can get, say, a blowtorch and you can heat up a blade and cut it, or you could cut it and come back with a lighter and just melt the ends. That way they don't fray. Ta-da! Okay, so get rid of that. So once you've measured out where you want this to end, the other thing we're going to do is we're actually going to pull some of this out, and we're going to cut that off as well so that we can either melt or sew the end to close it off. Good note to go by is you can always take off more, you can't put it back on. Woo! Ah, see, so that isn't going to be enough, so we're going to have to do a little more. I happen to have another tool called the Speedy Stitcher, and you don't even actually have to, it's just a hand stitching tool. You could just hand sew this, or if you have a sewing machine you could do that as well. I'm basically just going to come through and I'm going to stitch this probably about an inch or 3/4 of an inch away from the edge, and then I'll melt the end, and then I'm going to screw it on. So we'll proceed with that. Filming this part, but what I did here is I just took the hot knife and I remelted it, and while I was melting it I also used a pair of needle nose pliers and I basically pinched the material and melted it at the same time. You can do the same thing by heating up a blade with a blowtorch like I said earlier, or even if you just use a lighter. Basically you're just trying to melt the edge together, and so by using a pair of needle nose you're able to really pinch and get a good grip and able to seal that ending right there. So just a few things to wrap up this video. We showed you how to install it, I think this is a really good rub rail if your boat's going to be used a lot. It's going to go through a lot of abuse and bumping, and so if that sounds like something your Boston Whaler is going to be used for, I'd recommend using this rub rail. If you're doing something like fishing, I wouldn't use this rub rail because it's fabric, so it's really easy for the hooks to get stuck in the rub rail. And on top of that, if you're looking for a Boston Whaler restoration, I also wouldn't use this rub rail because it's not your traditional rub rail. I think if you're really going for a full Boston Whaler restore, I would just use the traditional OEM Boston Whaler 3-part rub rail. If you guys have any questions, feel free to let us know. If you guys haven't subscribed already and you guys really enjoyed this video and you found it helpful and you'd love to support this channel and watch us grow, we'd highly recommend you hit the subscribe button down below. And if you're interested in getting more notifications on that, you can hit the notification bell next to that. And if you'd also like to support this channel, don't forget to leave a like down below. We'll see you guys in the next one in part 2, where we will be putting on an outboard onto our Boston Whaler.